This is an NBC News special report. Here's Kate Snow.
Good day, everyone. We are coming on the air on the network now with breaking news on Capitol Hill. You see House Speaker Mike Johnson, he has just been voted reelected to be the Speaker of the House. This comes as a bit of a surprise because there were dramatic moments in the House chamber when Speaker Johnson appeared to have lost the first round of balloting, with 3 members of his own party, 3 Republicans, initially voting against him, and he could only afford to lose 1 vote from his party. But that first vote was not official until gavelled out, and before it was gavelled, apparently, in a series of last-minute negotiations, 2 members came forward and then changed their votes from against Johnson to voting for Mr. Johnson. Julie Sirkin is on Capitol Hill with more for us. Julie, what do we know about what happened just in the last 15 minutes?
Well, what happened is that Johnson and members of his team, his allies, have been working the floor. I saw them all across the House chamber going into the cloakroom on the phones as well. Perhaps it was President-elect on the other side. Perhaps it was just his allies. We know that Trump supported Johnson to get the gavel, to retake it, I should say, and that is because with Johnson officially having the gavel now, Kate, now business can happen. Remember, without a speaker, they couldn't even certify the president's win, Trump's win on January 6th. They can't do anything. Now that they finally have a speaker, Johnson has the gavel, narrowly getting the 218 votes, still losing 1, that is Thomas Massie, a Republican from Kentucky, but ultimately winning the other 2 over, Keith Self of Texas and Ralph Norman of South Carolina. Johnson now has a very narrow majority, very narrow margin, but he does have the gavel in hand. He appeared emotional when his name was called, when they finally called that first round of voting. This was very different than what we saw with Kevin McCarthy 2 years ago. This happening in 1 dramatic round. Kevin McCarthy's happening in 15 ballots. Nobody besides Johnson appeared that they could get the gavel, even though we saw 3 Republicans vote for somebody other than Johnson. But all in all, Johnson squeezing out this victory. I'll tell you today, even as difficult as it was, maybe the easiest experience that Johnson has trying to keep his members together in what will be a very ambitious next 2 years of Trump's agenda. And certainly today he got a taste of it.
All right, our congressional correspondent Julie Sirkin with us. Julie, thank you. Let me turn over to our senior Capitol Hill correspondent, Garrett Hake, who's been following this all day as well. Garrett, why would these 3 Republicans have voted no and then 2 of them changed their votes? Do we have any context?
We don't yet, Kate, but we hopefully will shortly, as at least one of those members, Ralph Norman, is pretty chatty with reporters about the way that he thinks this institution should be run. These are all pro-Trump conservatives, at least the way that they style themselves, who voted against Donald Trump's preferred candidate to be Speaker. You mentioned 2 out of the 3 ultimately changing their votes after huddling with now, once again, Speaker Mike Johnson and his deputies off the floor for some time. Only Thomas Massie, who came into this a committed opponent of Mike Johnson, will leave it a committed opponent to Mike Johnson. But I think we should step back a little bit here and just catch what an important moment this will be for the Republican Party as they retake unified control of Washington. After the last 2 years, Republicans, especially in the House, were desperate to show that they can govern in this town and that they can get things done on their agenda. Had they failed either on this first ballot or through some protracted process to even get a speaker elected, I think it would have been a very negative sign for that unified Republican government. Now they can say, we have done at least this thing on day 1, and we're ready for everything else that follows. But again, as Julie pointed out, everything else that follows will be more challenging than this.
Right, and Garrett, I wonder whether just this moment of delay and this moment of having to go through some hoops to get there, does that indicate that the party's going to have a hard time governing?
I think it's absolutely a reminder of how thin the margins are. Every vote that we're going to see over the next couple of months, at least, while some members are not yet replaced, Matt Gaetz, who stepped down, other members who are going to get called up to the Trump administration and will have to be replaced. The House Republicans will have to operate on these very thin majorities for a very short period of time. We talk about it so often with the Senate, where any one member can control so much. Usually in the House, where the margins are larger, it takes a significantly sized group to swing things. Now the House will be like the Senate, where any one or two members can impose their will, at least on blocking something they don't like, if not passing something that they do. And you're seeing some of these House members exercise that power in real time today.
Garrett, do you have any reporting on whether, in fact, the president-elect has been phoning members?
Well, Kate, we knew that he was in the lead up to this vote over the last several days, and as recently as this morning, Speaker Johnson told reporters on the way into the chamber. I have not yet been able to confirm if he was making calls during the vote. I had some Trump staffers and allies playing a bit coy with me when I've posed the question. But having covered Donald Trump for a long time, I think if he exerted some political will to make this happen, he'll probably tell us himself before the day is out.
Well, that's for sure. All right, Garrett Haake, thank you so much. Garrett Haake on Capitol Hill. That concludes this NBC News special report. We will have much more ahead on our streaming network, NBC News Now. For some of you, NBC News Daily will continue. And you can always go online, NBCnews.com. And tonight you can watch more on NBC Nightly News. I'm Kate Snow. Thank you for watching.